In this video, I'm going to show you how to make the 4-patch variation quilt block. It's part of my Block of the Month series, and if you'd like to join us or find out more, I'll put a link down below. And if you're new here, my name's Stacey. Thanks so much for watching this video. But for now, let me show you how to make this block. So I've already cut the pieces that you need, and you can find these cutting instructions over on my website. I'll put a link down in the description below. But to start off with, we're going to take our B pieces and cut those. So with each of our B pieces, we're going to cut a diagonal line from corner to corner. So I'm just going to take my ruler, line it up on the top corner, line it up on the bottom, and then I just check again at the top because it can move around. And then when I'm happy, I'm just going to cut it in half. And then I'm going to repeat that for all 4 pieces. So now on one of my A pieces, I'm going to take one of my triangles and line it up along one of my edges, just like that. And I want to make sure everything's lined up, my fabrics are placed right sides together, and there is going to be a bit of an overhang on both sides. Now the key is to have about the same overhang on both sides so that we know it's in the middle. And I'm just doing it by eye, but if you would prefer, what you could do is fold both of the pieces of fabric in half, finger press them, and then line up the finger press. But I'm happy with that, so I'm just going to pop a pin in. I'll put one here and one here. And then I'm just going to sew along this edge. So I've got my 1/4 inch foot on to get my 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm stitching at stitch length 2. I'm using wonderful confetti thread, and I'm starting on the very edge and sewing all the way down to the bottom, removing my pins as I need to. Coming off the edge. So now on the opposite side of where we sewed our triangle, we're going to put another one. Again, lining up those edges and making sure it's in the middle. And I do find that it's easier to flip it over this way, just to double check. And of course, I place those pieces right sides together. And now we're just going to sew along that edge, just like we did on this side. Okay, now we're going to press. So setting our stitches, which sets our stitches into the fabric and helps our block lay flatter. Then we're going to open it up and press our seams towards our A fabric. So I'm just going to fold them in so that the seams are coming in towards the square or the A piece, finger pressing. We don't want any creases in there, and then pressing. And the same on this side. And then we're going to just trim off these dog ears here. So I'm just going to take my ruler, line it up on the edge of our A piece, and trim off those dog ears. Then I'm just going to turn around and do the same on this side. So now we're going to take our next triangle, line it up on the edge there, just like we have been. And again, we want it in the center. And again, if you are struggling with that, just fold, well, I'm going to do it. We could just fold this triangle in half, give it a finger press. And then we could take this piece, fold it in half and give it a finger press. And then we could just line up our finger press marks, so we know that's absolutely in the center. And then we can just pin it, making sure all the edges are lined up nicely. And of course our fabric is right sides together. Now, if I flip that over, you can see we've got the dog ears coming out perfectly, about the same amount on both sides. All I'm going to do is sew along this edge, then I'll do the same on this side, and then we'll press. And then this time we're going to press our seams towards our B fabric. So just finger pressing and then pressing. And the same on this side. And then we're just going to trim these dog ears again. So now we're just going to trim these dog's ears, and I'm also just going to square it up so it does measure 6.5 inches. And that looks good. I'm just going to cut a little bit of excess off, remembering we want about 1/4 of an inch in from all of our points. And I've got this rotating mat, which is really handy, but not essential. So you could just use a regular mat. Okay, I just took a little slither off. Now what we're going to do is repeat this process for the leftover A and B pieces. So we've got 2 squares like this. So now I've taken all my pieces, including the original C pieces that we cut, and placed them in the correct position so that they match our image above. Now what we're going to do is sew row 1 together and row 2 together. So I'll just take row 1, I'll pop these aside. I'm going to place them right sides together, line up these edges, and then sew. I'm actually going to flip it over because I'd like to sew it on this side to just keep an eye on these seams here. So just making sure all the edges are lined up nicely. And then where we can see the stitches coming into a V here, we just want to make sure we sew on this side of the stitches, the side towards the edge, to make sure we're not accidentally sewing off our point. So I'll just do that by eye. Now all I'm going to do is sew along that edge, and then when I'm finished, I'll do the same for row 2. Now we can just check our point. And I'm happy with that, but if you're not happy, you could always unpick your stitches and try again. Now I'll just sew my second row together. Now let's press. So I've placed the rows back into the correct position again. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press my seams so I can nest them. So for this top row, I'm going to press them to my right, and for this bottom row, I'm going to press them to my left. So just setting the stitches on both of them. And then these ones are going to go to my right or towards our C fabric, finger pressing and pressing. And these to my left or the C fabric. Okay, now we're just going to sew those rows together. Once again, placed our rows in the correct position, then I'm just going to take row 1, place it right sides together on row 2, and then I'm going to find the center seam, and we're going to nest the seams. So we've got one set of seams that are folded and coming this way, one set of seams that are folded and coming this way. Well, we're going to butt them up against each other so they can't go any further. And I just like to open it up and check I'm getting a nice straight line in there. And then when I am, I'm just going to pop a pin in. I've lined up all these edges too. And then I'm just going to pop a pin in at the end here and on this end and in the center. Now on this side, I'm going to be able to see where that V intersection is so that I make sure that I'm sewing on the right side to not accidentally cut off my point. But on this side, I can't see it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop my pin in right where that intersection is. Just going to flip it over, find that intersection. I've got a lot of loose threads in the way there. It's a bit fiddly. Okay, so my pin is coming right before that V intersection, so I know to sew on this side. So that's just my marker, so I know that I don't want to sew past where that pin goes in. And again, like I said, I can see it on this side. So just sewing at the very edge and coming down to the bottom, just like we have been. And I can feel my seam underneath is pushing up, but I want it to lay in the position that I've pressed it in, so I'm just fixing that up as I come to it. And now I'm coming up to the point that I want to make sure I'm sewing on the needle. How can I explain that? So where the needle goes in, I want to make sure I'm on that other side of it. And I can sew right up to a needle that's been put into my fabric that way. In fact, I could sew all the way over it. Some people don't like to do that, but I will just remove it. You can actually just sew right over the top of them when they're like that. That's kind of an old school thing to do. Okay, then we can open it up and we can check our point. And actually, I've actually got a lot of extra room there, so if I wanted to, I could fix it, or I could decide whether I'm just happy to carry on, and I'm just going to leave it at this stage. So now I'm just going to press my seams open, and this is just a personal preference. You should press yours however you like. It can be a little bit fiddly pressing them open. Okay, and then I'll just flip it over and give it a once over on this side. And doesn't that look neat? So there we have our 4-patch variation quilt block, and I really love that. What do you think? So I hope you enjoyed this quilt block, and I don't know about you, but I think this quilt block looks way more complicated than it really is. It's actually really simple when we just break it down step by step. If you're looking for another block to make, I'll put a link above for our rail fence quilt block. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.